Hey there, I'm Jane Sawyer. I show you how to make kick-ass art on a cheap-ass budget, and today we're making some little air-dry clay Christmas ghosts. When this little witchy ghost project from earlier this year went viral, a lot of people were posting comments like, can you show us some Christmas projects? Can't wait to see what you do for Christmas. And I was like, ugh, I'm not really a huge fan of Christmas. I'd really just like to make more spooky stuff. But little did I know, Christmas has a much bigger history with ghosts than you might expect. Of course, the most famous trio of Christmas ghosts you can probably think of are those from Charles Dickens' 1843 novel, Christmas Carol. And Dickens really knew his audience when he dropped this one because the Victorians loved ghosts and they loved Christmas. Many of our Christmas traditions today come from Queen Victoria. Without her, we might not have Christmas trees, Christmas cards, Christmas carols, mistletoe. So it's not surprising that Dickens' ghost story still endures as a popular Christmas tradition. What's perhaps more surprising is that we don't have even more Christmas ghosts. Long before Christmas became a Christian holiday, the winter solstice was associated with the thinning of the veil between life and death. And it's not hard to imagine that families would want to cuddle up next to a fire and tell some stories about their lost loved ones during the coldest and darkest days of the year. You might not have noticed, but even that song that goes, "It's the most wonderful time of the year," has a line in it about telling ghost stories. So ghosts are a decidedly Christmas craft. We're gonna make some little ghosts wearing Santa hats today. You can grab the template for free at janesawyermakes.com or for cheap on my Patreon. I'll link both in the description. I don't really care whether you take it for free or buy it for cheap. I just really want you to give this project a go. I'm using creative paper clay for this project. I really recommend you pick up this or DOS brand clay. I have both linked in my Amazon storefront and they're equally good. The reason I recommend these clays is because they have a ton of paper fiber in them, which means you can use glue to attach it to itself. It doesn't crack much when it's drying, and it also doesn't dry brittle. If you are using a mineral-based clay, foam clay, cold porcelain, salt dough, or anything else, you're gonna have a hard time getting this one to work for you. If you're using Crayola air dry clay, save yourself some time and just throw a chunk of it directly into the garbage. That stuff always cracks and falls apart. Oh, and you're also gonna need this other stuff. Vinyl or plastic surface to work on, some 3-ounce paper cups, a bit of aluminum foil, masking tape, some way of making your clay flat. A wooden rolling pin is best, but you can always use a bottle sprinkled with a bit of cornstarch if you don't have a rolling pin. A knife and a spoon or sculpting tools of your choice, a skinny paintbrush, a small dish of water, some good quality white glue, and some painting supplies. So off camera, I've already cut out my hat trim and ghost body template pieces, but before we even get the clay out, we're gonna make a form. We're gonna use these 3-ounce paper cups. I've got these and everything else I'm using linked in the supply list in the video description. I like to double up my cups because it makes a form a little sturdier. Now I'm making a little dome out of aluminum foil that's about the same size as the base of the paper cup. A good tip is to squish and press the foil against the table to smooth it out. Once you've got the dome made, we're going to use some masking tape to stick it to the base of the cup. I find the best way to do this is to go super long with the tape so you can go over the top of the foil all the way down the wall of the cup and then tuck the ends of the tape inside the cup. You're going to want to go ahead and make one form for each ghost you'd like to make. A pound of clay makes about 3 ghosts with a little bit left over. We'll set our form aside and now we can get into the clay. I'm working on one of the plastic mats you see me use all the time. I do recommend a firm plastic work surface for this project because it won't wrinkle up on you and the plastic doesn't absorb moisture out of the clay while you're trying to work with it. Cut off about 1/3 of your clay brick and give it a bit of a knead to soften it up. I like to smack it into a ball and use my thumb or finger to smooth over any big seams. We're going to roll out a sheet of clay now. A great tip to keep your sheet of clay nice and even is to use a couple of paint stir sticks on either side of your clay and float your rolling pin on top of these. I'll show you in a sec. Another trick I like is to flatten out your clay a bit with the heel of your hands to get it started. Once you've done that, put your rolling pin on the middle and roll it forward and backwards a couple of times. Peel the sheet off of your plastic mat and flip it over and rotate it 90 degrees and keep doing this as you roll it out. This will help you get a nice even slab without it sticking to the rolling pin or the plastic mat. Now we're going to bring in our 2 template pieces and we're placing them on the sheet of clay. I'm using this dollar store paring knife to cut them out. When I pull up my scraps, I like to ball them back together, give them a little mist with some water, and then I'll put them back into the Ziploc bag that I use to store my clay. You can move that long rectangle piece out of the way if you need to. I'm using my thumb to gently squish down the right side of the wedge shape, going back in with my knife and scratching the surface with the tip. Now I'm peeling up the slab, flipping it over, and again, repeating the squishing and scratching process down the right side of the wedge again. So just make sure you're doing one right side, flipping it over, and doing the right side again. Now we're going to form this flat wedge into a cone. I'm using a good quality white glue on the edges, and while supporting the shape from the inside with my fingers, I'm using the handle of my knife to compress and smooth the seam. You can use a tiny bit of water on your finger to help you smooth out the seam, but really try not to use too much water here or your ghost will be too soggy to stand up. Once I've got the seam together, I'm gently sliding my paper cup form inside. The goal here is to have the form support the clay, but you want to try not to get the clay stuck to the form. Now we want to flare out the base of the ghost so it looks a little more flowy and natural. I do this by getting my thumb and first two fingers slightly damp, then gently pinching and pulling the edge of the ghost to create some ruffles. Work your way around the edge of the ghost. Now is a great time to make sure your form isn't stuck inside your ghost. If it has gotten stuck a bit, try giving the cup a twist as you pull it out. That should help. Once it's unstuck, you can put it back inside. Now I want to give the Santa hat a bit of a slouch. I'm using the back of my knife to press a couple of X's into the top of the cone. I usually do this right over the join we just made. Then I'm using a tiny bit of water opposite the X's and gently encouraging the clay to fold over. You want to do this gradually with repeated motions instead of just smashing it over in one go. You got to kind of convince the clay to move, not force it. Now we can bring back that long rectangle piece. This is going to be the fur trim around the Santa hat. I like to add a bit of texture here. You can use a crumpled up ball of foil or a toothbrush to do that. I think both look great. Once you've got it looking thoroughly fuzzy, put a little bit of glue on the back of this piece and wrap it around the Santa hat. If you find your piece is a bit long and you need to cut a bit off of this piece, that's okay. And you can use your texture tool to hide the seam. To make the hat's pom-pom, I'm using this guide on the template to roll an appropriately sized ball of clay. I'm using the end of the paintbrush to make a hole partway into the ball, and then I'm putting a drop of glue in there and squishing it onto the end of the hat. I'll use my foil or toothbrush to add some texture here too. Finally, I use the end of a paintbrush to poke in some eye holes. I'm wiggling the brush up and down to give the holes that oval, ghosty look. After you make the eyes, double check that the form isn't stuck, and then set the project aside to dry. After about an hour or two of drying, you want to pull out the form and let the ghost finish drying without the form inside. When your ghost is fully dry, you can use a paper nail file to smooth out any lumps and bumps you don't like. I like these ones because they're water resistant, so you can rinse them out. Just make sure you always protect your lungs when sanding. You also want to wipe up any loose dust on both your work surface and your project before you move on to painting. I'm using acrylic craft paint to paint the Santa hats. You can paint your ghosts too, but I'm leaving the ghosts unpainted because I like this off-white color of the clay. When the paint is dry, you could put a clear coat over top to finish it. I don't usually bother though. I used some watercolors to put a little holly pattern on this one ghost, almost as if he's wearing some Christmas bed sheets. And I'm just showing you how I did that now. Here are the ghosts I made all dry. I picked up these battery-operated votive candles from the dollar store to light them up. Of course, you cannot use a real flame candle here. And they're done. What do you think? Give this video a like if you think I did a good job. I think they're really freaking cute. Subscribe for more kick-ass art on a cheap-ass budget. Again, you can get the template for this project at janesawyermakes.com or on my Patreon. If you make this project, I would love if you would share a picture with me. I'm at Jane Sawyer Makes on all the socials. Have a spooky Christmas, and I'll see you on the next one. Of course, the most famous trio of Christmas... Of course, the most famous... Slow down. Of course, the most famous trio of Christmas ghosts you can probably think of